Coming up on Bridge City News, the mayor of Pincher Creek shares his concerns with BCN about the potential of 9 doctors resigning from his town's hospital. The province has launched a formal workplace investigation into 2 meat processing plants infected with COVID-19. And the federal government announced it will be investing more than $1 billion into trying to find a COVID-19 vaccine.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. For the first time in almost a century, the Calgary Stampede has been cancelled. City officials said due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they simply could not afford to move ahead. The annual event, which takes place the first week of July, usually draws more than 1 million visitors and injects close to $550 million into the provincial economy. Calgary Mayor Ned Nenshi says with the energy sector already hurting and now having to cancel the greatest outdoor show on earth, it's simply devastating. Calgary Tory MP Michelle Rempel-Garner says cancelling the Calgary Stampede is a really big deal.
The Stampede has never been canceled, and my community has gone through very difficult times over the course of its 108-year history, and we've never had a situation like this. So I just wanted to talk to my constituents because I know this is hard for me. It's hard for me to process because every day I'm getting a tsunami of your calls, just, you know, the feelings of just frustration and anger and hopelessness, and hearing loud and clear that we need a plan to reopen the economy.
Rempel-Garner says she's written a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressing how the Calgary Stampede must be supported so that it can come back stronger than ever for years to come. 9 of 11 doctors are saying they will not be working at the hospital in Pincher Creek after the provincial government made changes to the way that doctors are able to keep their clinics running in the same capacity that they're used to. Some of the doctors are also allegedly saying that it is not financially attainable in this current climate of COVID-19 to keep hospital and physician care going. Now, the mayor of Pincher Creek says if the doctors do walk, it will seriously impact his town. He says he's worried that families will not get the care they need.
100 births a year is significant, so if all that is not available to us, babies will have to probably go to Lethbridge, where the emergency services are going to be taken care of, or how they're going to be taken care of hasn't been announced by the province for sure, so that's really concerning to us. It's the same situation for everybody rurally around the province. Trying to attract and retain physicians in rural setting is really difficult to begin with. If we can't get doctors here, we're in real trouble.
Annenberg says that the town of Pincher Creek has been talking to local doctors since November. He says they've been trying to advocate on their behalf to try to delay or suspend these provincial changes until proper consultation is done. Officials with Alberta Health Services say so far they've only received official notice that 1 physician is leaving the Pincher Creek Hospital. In a statement released earlier today, the AHS had this to say: "We have strategies in place to ensure patients continue to receive the care they need, which includes working with physicians who serve notice to ensure an adequate transition period. Physicians have committed to continuing to provide hospital coverage through the pandemic. Our patients are our #1 priority, and we will ensure that patients are put first above all else." The province says there are now 319 new cases of COVID-19, bringing the total number to 3,720. Of those, 1,357 people have recovered. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says one of the new cases is from a worker from the Sophia Foods plant in Calgary.
AHS is working with the plant to ensure that prevention measures are in place and plant operations have slowed due to the number of staff currently on isolation. AHS is offering testing to all employees, even those without symptoms. I must also report that there have been 2 additional deaths in the province. This brings the total number of lives lost to 68 so far. These 2 additional deaths are the ones that I mentioned yesterday with respect to Brooks, which have now both been confirmed as cases of COVID-19.
It is every parent's worst nightmare. One of your children is killed. Sadly, that became a reality for one Lethbridge family last week when their 10-year-old son died after being hit by a car last Monday afternoon. Now, as Loris Alexander explains, a few pubs and restaurants in our city are joining forces to show their support and raise funds for the family.
The tragedy that took place last week really shook the community, and I couldn't help but feel that we needed to put something together to help this family.
Charles Douglas McIntyre died in hospital on April 13th after being hit by a car in West Lethbridge. He was only 10 years old. Meeks says it was all too close to him. He and his partner, along with their daughter, were walking when they heard a commotion.
My partner and I, we are actually one of the people on the scene there, so I was able to phone 911 when everything was happening.
Now Meeks wants to support the McIntyres in this tough time by organizing a fundraiser for Charles.
I don't think that we're doing anything spectacular, right? We just had the means to throw it together, and luckily the community seemed to rally around that. We said, you know what, let's just keep it simple. You get a hamburger, fries, we can offer a drink, whether that's a bottle of beer or a bottle of water. We just wanted to keep it straight across the board, simple enough so our menu can keep, or our cooks can keep up with the demand.
Meeks says the fundraiser snowballed despite COVID-19. And bottom line, he's thinking of the McIntyres who are mourning the loss of their little boy.
Things have been tough for a lot of people over the last couple months. There's a lot of uncertainty. Even across our restaurants, we've been very thankful for the support that we've gotten from our community, and we wanted to give back. And this is your opportunity to give back to a family that has been going through a lot.
The family says they are amazed at the outpouring of support from the community. There is no GoFundMe page set up, but there are other ways that you can support the McIntyre family. The fundraiser for Charles will be taking place tomorrow between 11:30 a.m. and 8 p.m. And again, it's at these following locations: Mojo's Pub and Grill, where I was just at, Kingsman Ale House, and Pop's Tap House in South Lethbridge. For Bridge City News in Lethbridge, I'm Loris Alexander.
The Alberta government is launching workplace investigations into 2 beef processing plants, one in Cargill by High River and the other at JBS Canada's facility near Brooks. Alberta Deputy Labour Minister Sean McLeod says the province is looking into circumstances surrounding workers being exposed to COVID-19. The Cargill plant shut down on Monday, has 440 cases of the coronavirus among its workers and 1 death. Through community transmission, that number has increased to 580 cases. At JBS Foods in Brooks, the number is closer to 70. Many farmers will begin spring planting very soon. Now, with the coronavirus, there have been many challenges. Melody Garner-Skiba is the executive director of the Alberta Sugar Beets Grower Association. Garner-Skiba says the coronavirus has impacted their business as well, but she says the bottom line is getting food on the table for families.
COVID is definitely presenting challenges for the ag industry here and across the country. And I think it's fair to say that our focus right now is on ensuring that we've got food on the grocery shelves come October, November. So a lot of our producers right now are just focused on making sure they can get the crops in the ground so that we can continue to feed Albertans in the world down the road after COVID hopefully goes away.
In Canada, there's one sugar refinery that uses sugar from sugar beets, and that is the Rogers Sugar Factory located in Taber. Outside of sugar, the factory also makes livestock feed and molasses. The Lethbridge and Area Auto Dealers Association has donated $15,000 to local food banks in our area. President Tim Shipper says that he and his colleagues recognize the impact COVID-19 has had on the business community.
We're not immune to any of the effects of this virus, the effects of this virus is having on the business community and the unemployment rates and that kind of thing. We're seeing massive impacts on our businesses as well. It has to be worse for smaller businesses than us in our area, and of course their employees and team members that are most likely at home now. So we know that the food banks will be in high demand, so that's why we decided to do it.
If you think of used computers, you likely would not think about where they go once you recycle them. As Mike Aquin explains now, AB Recycling in Lethbridge is asking you to not only bring in your computer, but other recycling, and they'll then commit a portion of their sales to refurbish used computers and donate them to families in need.
If you drop off your used computers to be recycled, AB Recycling is making sure they will stay in Lethbridge to be refurbished for families.
We are going to be donating 1 out of every 10 computers to a family in need. We are currently looking for organizations to help us distribute these fairly to the families.
Harrison says that the donation idea came from people contacting him.
And after a couple of people contacted us, we saw that there's an opportunity for us to help the community.
You can drop off your used recycling items in this bin right beside me.
We're not taking TVs anymore, but we've found how to recycle those again. So we are taking all TVs for recycling again, as well as computers, computer accessories, phones, laptops, TV boxes, microwaves, treadmills, exercise equipment.
There are also items that AB Recycling isn't accepting for drop-off.
We aren't accepting anything that's refrigerated, so like fridges, freezers, coolers, air conditioners. And we're not taking plastic items like car seats or plastic tubs or toys.
The community appreciates the recycling service that they provide, Harris says, and that people say they need a recycling place like this in Lethbridge. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Experts are now saying the job loss and the anticipation of unemployment is leading to more domestic violence cases. Shannon Hansen, CEO of the local YWCA, spoke about this during a live stream hosted by the Southern Alberta Council of Public Affairs.
Statistics show that it's not the difference between when people lose a job and domestic violence. There's obviously a correlation, but there's even a higher correlation with the threat of job loss. The threat of income loss is more likely to provoke domestic violence than the actual job or income loss. So not only do we have people experiencing job and income loss, which is a huge stressor, the stress of the potential job and income loss is more significant and produces more domestic violence statistically than the actual loss.
Hansen says Lethbridge posts the highest number in the province for people who are turned away from domestic shelters. Lethbridge police have charged a man and a woman with drug and weapons offenses. An early April investigation led police to a home at Mount Sundial Bay. During a search, police seized fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine. 2 children, aged 8 and 14, were also taken and turned over to the care of a relative. In addition, police seized nearly $22,000 in cash, a loaded handgun, a Mercedes-Benz, an ATV, an electric bike, a gold Rolex watch, and a necklace worth around $12,000. The 33-year-old man and 43-year-old woman face a wide range of charges, including drug trafficking, possession of a restricted firearm, and causing a child to be drug endangered. The names of the 2 being charged are not being released as to protect the identity of the children. Ottawa has announced that it will be pumping more than $1 billion into research to develop, test, and manufacture a COVID-19 vaccine. Industry Minister Navdeep Bains says most of it will be spent on funding vaccine development and clinical trials.
Canadian scientists will sequence 150,000 virus samples and 10,000 human host genomes to understand how the human body responds to the virus and to track the evolution of this virus as it spreads. Canada is already an established international leader in genomic research. The results of this work will be accessible to researchers around the world to move ahead with this global fight against COVID-19.
The federal government is also setting up a task force of public health experts to oversee a national blood test survey so officials can have more information on vulnerabilities across the country. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says the federal government should present a national plan for reopening the economy after the COVID-19 shutdown to avoid a patchwork of different approaches across the country. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says provinces need to do what is appropriate for their situations, but Ottawa will help to coordinate as restrictions begin to loosen.
Certain provinces have been able to flatten the curve and are now starting to talk about when they may be able to slowly start revising health restrictions over the coming weeks and months. This has raised concerns about a possible patchwork approach across the country. Other countries have released national frameworks, so why hasn't Canada? Does the federal government have a plan to start revising health restrictions in an orderly fashion when this crisis passes?
We know that everyone wants to know when this is going to be over, when we're going to be able to get back to normal life. Well, until we have either a vaccine or significant treatments for COVID-19, we're not going to be able to talk about getting back to normal. But in the coming months, we will be able to loosen a number of the restrictions and rules that we have right now on personal mobility in certain sectors, on the economy. Different provinces are in very different postures related to COVID-19 and will be taking decisions that are appropriate for them.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe announced that his government is preparing to reopen its economy. Moe says businesses and services may be allowed to reopen next month as part of a 5-part phase-in plan.
Our government takes this decision extremely seriously. We know there are risks on both sides. If we move too quickly, we risk increasing the spread of COVID-19. If we move too slowly, we risk permanent damage to the livelihoods of thousands of Saskatchewan people, businesses that may never reopen, and jobs that may never come back. So we have to find the right path. So tomorrow, we will unveil a plan to gradually and methodically reopen businesses and public services that have been closed because of this pandemic.
Mo says as employees return to work, physical distancing and cleaning procedures will have to remain in place. I asked our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, what the new normal will look like as provinces slowly begin to reopen their economies.
This new normal that we're going to be reopening to is not going to be like it was a year ago. If you're going to buy a new pair of shoes at, Sport Check as it reopens, you're going to be social distancing, those sorts of things. So, all this talk is contingent on a great many factors, and it's really, really not going to be, I think, what many people are maybe hoping for. You're not going to be having the family over for a big backyard party anytime soon.
Catch the entire interview with Tyler Dawson with the National Post discussing how many provinces are trying to pull themselves out of a recession that is coming up after Business News. Many churches south of the border are poised to reopen on May the 3rd. Matt Staver, the chairman of Liberty Council, says he agrees with U.S. President Donald Trump that the church plays a vital role and needs to reopen sooner rather than later.
Churches are absolutely essential. Churches cannot just, in many cases, flip off the lights and resort to a podcast. Many churches feed people. When the churches close, those individuals go hungry. Many people provide counsel and other kind of support that's simply impossible to do online. With all of these lockdowns, we know that dramatic increases have occurred in domestic violence, child abuse, child sexual exploitation, online pornography, alcohol consumption, depression, and even suicide. With the churches closed, you can't minister to those people online.
RCMP in Nova Scotia say they considered issuing an emergency alert last Sunday after realizing a man killing people and burning homes was wearing a police uniform.
Our critical incident command staff were processing fast-changing information related to what was unfolding in front of them and what they were being told of. We responded to a possible shooting at 10:26 p.m. on Saturday evening. It was determined to be a homicide, and we immediately started searching the area and advising residents to stay inside. We used Twitter to alert residents of a firearms complaint in the Portapique area and to stay in.
You may have seen a very familiar face on television last night. A Lethbridge woman got the opportunity of a lifetime to not only be on a nationally televised game show to meet a TV icon, but also to win some big money while doing it. Jeanette Rocher tells us what it took for Sharon Lawson to get on one of the most watched TV shows of all time, Jeopardy!
We're all familiar with the iconic theme music and the famous face behind the game. But what's not typical is seeing someone from Lethbridge standing on that stage. For Sharon Lawson, it was a dream to get to stand at this podium.
Mind-blowing. I was nervous.
But what most of us don't know is how long of a process it is to apply and to get chosen to compete. For the contestants, the competition begins long before the theme music starts.
You start by taking the online test. It's 50 questions. You have 15 seconds a question. And they don't tell you anything. They just say, if you're selected for an interview, we'll contact you. About 6 months after I took the test, I got an email inviting me to Vancouver for a contestant audition.
From there, she was put on an 18-month waiting list. Then, finally, 2 years after her initial testing,
I got the phone call on January 27th.
Did she risk enough over those wild Canadians?
Lawson won her first round with over $19,000.
I seem to have a head for useless information.
But how far did she actually get in the game?
I'll keep it a secret.
I guess we'll have to keep on watching to find out. For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
By the way, Sharon will be back on again tonight for another round of Jeopardy! We had lots of clouds and some moisture in certain areas of southwestern Alberta today. The warm temperatures we've experiencing will be sticking around. Full weather details are on deck. We had a little moisture earlier today, but the clouds should be clearing out. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the forecast. Jeanette, more sunshine and warm temperatures are on the horizon.
Well, yeah, definitely some moisture in the air as we had that risk of a thunderstorm today. And then into this evening, we are going to be seeing a 60% chance of showers with a risk of an evening thunderstorm as well. The overnight low is 0 degrees, and we're going to be seeing some clearing overnight and into tomorrow morning. We are going to wake up to some sunny skies with a high of 15 degrees on Friday. The overnight low 3 degrees for Friday night. And then looking ahead to the 5-day forecast, some scattered clouds for Saturday, but look at that temperature, a lovely 17 degrees. 15 expected on Sunday with lots of sunshine. Sunshine expected as well for Monday with a high of 14 degrees. 19 degrees is the high for Tuesday, and a lovely 22 degrees is the high expected on Wednesday, with a mix of scattered clouds. So the average high for this time of year, 15 degrees, according to the almanac. We're definitely in that range and beyond. The average lows for overnight is 1 degrees. The high temperature on this day was back in 1962. It was 25 degrees. And look at that low. It was a chilly minus 18 that was back in 1967. The sun rose at 6:22 a.m. and it set at 8:37 p.m. So let's take a look at the highs across the nation, starting with the West Coast. Chance of showers over in Victoria and Vancouver on Friday with highs of 16 and 15 degrees in those cities. 15 is the high in Edmonton with some scattered clouds. There is a chance of some showers tomorrow in Calgary with a high of 14 degrees. Now we're going to be seeing some scattered showers as well across Saskatchewan on Friday, high of 16 in Saskatoon. 18 degrees is the high in Regina, and sunny skies expected over in Winnipeg with a high of 18 degrees as they're finally reaching their nice spring-like weather. Over in Toronto, though, a different story with a high of 6 degrees. Chance of showers there, but sunny skies over in Ottawa and Montreal with 8 degrees and 7 degrees being the highs for those two cities. Now, as we look into the Maritimes, Fredericton's high 3 degrees, scattered clouds. We could be seeing a chance of some flurries, though, in Halifax. High of 4 degrees. 2 degrees is the high in Charlottetown. They're also seeing a 40% chance of flurries there. Same thing for St. John's. Their high Friday, 5 degrees with a chance of flurries. So there you go. That is your forecast.
WestJet is removing around 600 domestic flights from their schedule between May 5th and June 4th due to reduced demand during the COVID-19 pandemic. The cancellations total around 18,000 trips. The Calgary-based carrier says all international flights, including to the United States, remain suspended through June the 4th. Last week, Air Canada halted most international flights until June, while Air Transat and Sunwing Airlines canceled all trips until May 31st. A new online survey says Canadian entrepreneurs are quite concerned about how the coronavirus pandemic is affecting their businesses. The BDC surveyed 900 entrepreneurs, and 79% say they were very worried their businesses may not survive. Now, that's actually down, however, from 83% from 2 weeks earlier. The president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says entrepreneurs are still worried, but now they know a lot more about the new needs of their consumers and what supports are open to them. Calgary-based Dominion Mines has filed for creditor protection after diamond markets were closed due to the COVID-19 outbreak. It says an Alberta court has granted the filing under the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act. The company says this will buy it time to restructure and negotiate with its creditors. Diamond operates the Ekati Diamond Mine, in which it owns a controlling interest. It also owns a 40% stake in a mine in Yellowknife. Many of Europe's economies are headed for an unprecedented recession due to lockdown measures imposed to contain the coronavirus pandemic. Now, that's according to a survey by financial firm IHS Markit. It says the Purchasing Managers Index for the Eurozone plummeted to a record low of 13.5 points in April. Now, that's down from 29.7% in March and well below its lowest point of 36.2 during the global financial crisis in 2009. Economists estimate the economy of the 19-country Eurozone is shrinking at a quarterly rate of 7.5%. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 37 points today to 14,251. The Dow was up 39 to 23,515. The S&P 500 was down just over 1.5 points to 27.97, and the Nasdaq was down just under a point to 84.94. Oil was up $3.09 to $16.87 per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to $1.81. Gold was up 46 cents to $17.30 an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $15.25 an ounce. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton, barley's at $238, canola's at $454, and corn is at $238 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $3 to $88.75, feeder cattle were up 95 cents to $121.20, and lean hogs were up $3.75 to $50.98. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to $71.05 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government is launching workplace investigations into 2 beef processing plants, one in Cargill by High River and the other at JBS Canada's facility near Brooks. Alberta Deputy Labour Minister Sean McLeod says the province is looking into circumstances surrounding workers being exposed to COVID-19. Coming up, our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson explains how the town of High River and the city of Brooks have been dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. That Q&A with Tyler is coming up. The town of High River is still dealing with an outbreak of COVID-19, and one of its main employers, Cargill, is now closed as close to 500 people are infected with the virus. JBS Foods in Brooks is also dealing with the confirmed cases of the coronavirus. To talk more about it is Tyler Dawson, the Alberta correspondent with the National Post. Tyler, we're still hearing about new clusters of outbreaks not only at the meat packing facilities, but also at Curl Oil Sands Camp near Fort McMurray.
That's right. So Alberta has roughly 3,000 positive cases, has had 3,000. There's been recoveries from that number. And a good percentage of those are linked to these clusters. So, we've got clusters in long-term care homes in some cities, and we've got these sort of meatpacking clusters. And there's one up at the Curl Oil Sands facility, which is in Fort McMurray, or north of Fort McMurray, I should say, and ran by Imperial Oil. Now, there's a handful of people who are sort of on site who have tested positive for COVID-19. The rest of the people appear to have tested positive while off-site. So they're sort of somewhere in the community, and the exact location of those people isn't exactly known. Meanwhile, at the meatpacking and slaughterhouse facilities, there has been some concern about the supply chain. The Prime Minister weighing in on that this week, saying they're sort of keeping a close eye on it, all that kind of stuff. So, everyone's keeping quite a close watch on these big clusters of outbreaks where we're seeing, as you mentioned off the top, hundreds of people who've fallen ill because of, just probably a few cases in the beginning, and it can just spread like wildfire. So big concern to the powers that be, for sure.
So with some of the politicians you've been speaking with, Tyler, have they been saying we should maybe stock up on our beef, maybe get the big freezers and stock up now?
Well, I think most politicians at this point are discouraging hoarding of any sort, saying the supply chain is secure. And, the NDP, for example, raising a bit more stink perhaps about workers' protections and things like that. There was the tendency among the United Conservative government, I would say, early on in this stuff to sort of say that the facilities were complying with regulations and complying with inspections and that sort of thing. And then the outbreak sort of happened. So the NDP's been, a little bit of hue and cry about that. As I think we talked about the last time, it's still a little bit of politics as usual in the midst of the pandemic.
When will we finally be out of this pandemic and have our economy resume? I mean, Saskatchewan is releasing its plans soon. British Columbia and Ontario are also hinting that their plans to reopen their economies are coming fairly soon, even though the coronavirus cases are escalating in Ontario.
Yeah, Premier Doug Ford sort of came out and said, I think in some ways what everyone was thinking, just like people are going a bit nuts. We need to start being able to talk about when we can get out of this. So the plan is for Saskatchewan to release its plan. They've been working on that since last Monday when Premier Scott Moe suggested that was a possibility. Now, the thing about Saskatchewan is when Moe made that announcement, now we're talking about like the 13th or so, not just, a few days ago. There was only one new case that day in Saskatchewan. Since then, there's been a little bit of an up and down. On Tuesday, I believe there were 4 new cases. The Monday there had been 1. There had been 6 the Thursday before. So, these plans that are being tossed around are very, very tentative, based on the modeling that the provinces are working on and a whole bunch of other factors. Now, if we back up a couple more weeks, Premier Jason Kenney already laid out Alberta's reopening plan, which you might remember was all about, border control and increased testing and those sorts of things, and maybe tracking cases with smartphone apps. Now, in all of these cases, we're waiting for a few things. We're waiting for significant repeated declines in the number of daily new cases. We're looking for major increases in the number of tests that are being done to track down each of these sort of new cases. And this needs to be sustained. It can't just be, oh, we had a pretty good weekend with no new cases. No, this needs to be days and days, maybe weeks of declines before we can talk about opening up. And even then, this new normal that we're going to be reopening to is not going to be like it was a year ago. If you're going to buy a new pair of shoes at, I don't know, Sport Check as it reopens, you're going to be social distancing, those sorts of things. So, all this talk is contingent on a great many factors, and it's really, really not going to be, I think, unfortunately, what many people are maybe hoping for. You're not going to be having the family over for a big backyard party anytime soon.
The Alberta Investment Management Corporation, or AIMCO, Tyler, the province's government-owned pension management fund, has apparently taken a major hit due to COVID-19 and the drastic drop in oil prices. Unbelievable. A recent report said it lost more than $4 billion through a volatility-based investment strategy.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. I was puzzling through this, trying to figure out what exactly are these things. And so it turns out that the first news report on this emerged from a New York media company that looks at, investment related things that are going on. And basically it sounds like they just played it wrong. Took a bit of a gamble, as you said, volatility sort of things, which apparently are almost a uniquely Canadian investment sort of strategy. Long story short, they seem to have lost a pile of money. Now, it's important to remember, I think, in this context, that AIMCO is independent. It is not, the government isn't saying invest in this, that, and the other thing. And it's also worth remembering that AIMCO may yet be, the manager for the Alberta pension plan. So if this Fair Deal panel, cast our minds way back towards before the pandemic, when Kenny was talking about the Fair Deal panel, if we were to get an Alberta pension plan, AIMCO would likely be the manager of it. So this is important not just in the context of all of the people whose pension money is wrapped up in the fund, but at some point in the future, all of our money could be wrapped up in the fund.
The Privacy Commissioner is investigating Babylon, a telehealth app that the UCP ministers and the Premier touted at the start of the outbreak. Tyler, the big concern is that video recordings could be stored on Babylon servers. Word is the app was launched before an initial privacy assessment was done?
Yeah, so there's sort of a two-prong investigation being done into this, and as you said, part of it is that the actual assessment in the beginning appears not to have been fully completed. Now, people will remember there was again a little bit of a spat on Twitter between the New Democrats and the Premier's sort of issues management people about sort of touting this private company's medical app. And the idea was that this was going to be sort of virtual appointments for people, was going to help clear out some of the issues that we are seeing, I think, with regards to access to physicians. Apparently in a bit of hot water. So these investigations take time, and we'll have to see where it all ends up. But it's just another one of those things that there's been a little bit of controversy about in Alberta. That's either the opposition's doing a really good job in some ways, or they're making everyone's life difficult. Probably depending which side of the house you're sitting on. That's for sure.
We recently had a grass fire here in Lethbridge along the Old Man River. Tyler, wildfire season is just around the corner. The government has banned fires in forest protection areas and off-road vehicle traffic. So if anyone was intending, I guess, to drive out to a camp or a wilderness area, they're at a risk for fines.
That's right. So there was a briefing about this, and I was shocked to find out that about 70%, I think it was, of wildfires in Alberta are started by humans, whether that's, sparks from an off-road vehicle, whether that's a cigarette butt, whether that's a campfire run amok. And this early season time is the riskiest time for human-caused wildfires. It's actually later in the summer, apparently, when things like lightning strikes are more of a risk for starting fires. So, as you said, short version, the sort of forestry protection area that runs up the sort of east or western, I should say, side of the province, and then much of the north of the province, there are fire bans in place and off-road vehicle bans. Now, there are exceptions to this. Indigenous communities, for example, are still able to use off-road vehicles in sort of traditional ways if they're performing traditional duties. And I believe farmers and whatnot are still allowed burning in terms of perhaps garbage disposal, things like that. So there are a few exceptions to this, but the thing is, inconvenient though this may sound, a lot of the places that you would normally go to be out in the bush and hiking and camping and stuff are actually closed right now because the provincial parks are shut down. So maybe this isn't as huge an inconvenience as it might have been on a normal year.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that like Riding on Stone Provincial Park will reopen soon, especially this summer. And one of my favorites, Waterton, the national park. I mean, it'd be terrible and tragic if that didn't reopen. And Banff, of course, or even Jasper, where you are, not far from Edmonton.
Yeah.
Now, Ottawa is throwing the energy sector a bone in regards to $1.7 billion to clean up the orphan wells. Premier Kenney said, it's a nice start, but we need much more than that.
Yeah, so this was, the government, the provincial government, I should say, has been for quite some time now sort of haranguing the federal government, saying something's got to be done. We need help for the oil and gas industry. Even if you look back months and months ago, a year ago probably, right after the campaign, he was saying like, look, when there was a crash, the automobile sector in Ontario got aid really, really quickly. So they've been banging this drum for a long time. And in particular, in regards to the orphan wells, what the government has been saying is this is a way to keep lots of sort of small service companies operating, to keep people working through the course of the pandemic. So in that sense, this is, there was quite a debate months ago now about who should be paying for the well cleanup, whether or not it should be energy companies, whether or not municipalities or governments were going to have to take on some of this. I'm inclined to say that conversation has sort of dried up a little bit now, where everyone's more focused on trying to get people working, keep people working, I should say, and inject some money into this industry. As you say, certainly questions about whether or not this is enough. Oil was trading like negative prices earlier this week. There's talk of needing to find extra storage facility space in the province because I think by mid-August they're saying all of our reservoirs are going to be full, which again, then we end up with this sort of supply issue that we had a year ago. So a whole pile of, not ideal things happening for the oil and gas sector right now. And with no end in sight necessarily to the pandemic, I think people are again looking to Ottawa saying, oh my goodness, what's going to be done about this?
What's really scary as well is the UCP were banking on $58 a barrel. And then in the next few years, maybe $63 a barrel, we're, hit negative territory with oil. So suppliers are basically paying you to take the oil. So maybe tough times ahead here. Now, as Alberta tries to climb out of the recession due to the coronavirus pandemic, are the UCP and NDP maybe getting along a little better? Less fighting between Premier Kenney and Opposition Leader Rachel Notley?
Oh, I would say not really. I think there's sort of fundamental agreement on several things, but the NDP is certainly not letting up in terms of its condemnation of where they think the UCP has gone wrong, whether that is in terms of the protection for workers, whether that's the money that was initially doled out. As you just mentioned the budget. The NDP was aghast a few weeks ago when the UCP passed that budget. And I wouldn't shock me in the slightest if we start hearing really sort of loud demands for a financial update. Ontario had actually done that quite early on in the pandemic. But it would probably, I think the NDP would be interested. I think certainly me as a journalist and as a taxpayer in the province, I'd be interested on seeing what some of these models might look like now. Again, I should mention on Wednesday that Rachel Notley was out, demanding more supports for post-secondary students. So, it's an interesting thing because I think there's a lot of, as I've said, politics as usual going on and back and forth and sparring and this and that. But it is sort of all with the same goal in mind, which is to sort of keep Albertans safe and make sure everyone is healthy and protected. Certainly the ideologies behind each side of this thing haven't faded away in the same way that I think you could say they have in other parts of the country.
Have there also been more calls for more healthcare professionals to be brought back, especially during this coronavirus pandemic?
Well, I would say the thing we're hearing more about right now is whether or not healthcare professionals are going to be able to work. There seem to be reports in rural areas surfacing constantly about doctors concerned about being able to work, being able to get paid, things like that. Being in the city, I'm not super up to date on what's happening with all that, but I do know that there were conversations about that down in Rocky Mountain House quite recently. So I think that might be where the concerns are sort of focused at the moment, what rural medicine is going to look like, what the UCP is going to do to support rural medicine. On the other hand, I think probably most of our outbreaks are still in big cities. So, there's a lot of factors in all of this stuff, I think, for sure.
Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Thanks again for your time, Tyler.
My pleasure, Hal.
It seems that more and more people like the idea of living life in a more natural and sustainable way. But how do you go about doing that? Our guest today has a few ideas on that topic. Mandy Sandbach is the president of the Lethbridge Sustainable Living Association. Welcome to BCN, Mandy.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a bit about your group, the Lethbridge Sustainable Living Association. What is it all about?
Well, originally the group started in 2012 with a group of folks who wanted to create an eco-village. They recognized there was a need to maybe live in a more sustainable way. Since then, it's kind of morphed and changed into this like grassroots, hands-on, skill-sharing, collaborative approach. And so we have several different initiatives in the community, the Fruit Rescue Program, Permaculture Lethbridge, the Community Clothing Swap, and the Zero Waste Initiative as well. And so through all of those different initiatives, we're able to reach out and start to help people on their sustainable journey, regardless of where they're at.
Now, Mandy, food is one of your focal points. Why is it so important for people to grow their own?
Oh, wow. It's quite a holistic approach, the way the LSLA looks at it. But for me personally, we all have great memories of growing food with Grandma and Grandpa in our garden spaces. It's like something that nourishes our soul. And keeps us in touch with nature, which is really important. But from a perspective of local food production, what we want to see is people empowered to actually start learning these basic skills. There was a time and a place where we had that information sort of shared down from generation to generation, and it hasn't quite been that way. And so what we want to see is people empowered with the skills and knowledge to be able to do that, so that they can first go into their backyards and grow with the space and the soil that they have available, and then be able to assess where they're at for their food needs, rather than having to rely on grocery stores totally and completely. The other thing that it does is it creates this beautiful sense of community as we're gathering together and we're sharing knowledge and we're looking for land, because not everybody has access to land to grow in. And so not only are we growing local food that grows community, but we're also eating cleaner food typically when it does come from shorter distances away.
I have an uncle and aunt that have an acreage out by Bowden, and it was just acres and acres, it seemed like anyway, of peas and carrots. And it was so wonderful. You pull it out of the ground, take it off the vine, crack it open, eat it. It was so tasty and refreshing, right? Yeah. The only thing is when you got to harvest all those vegetables, right? That's a bit of work.
Yeah.
But I guess it's good exercise too at the same time.
Absolutely,
Now,
it's
do you
good.
teach gardening too? Gardening skills?
The Lethbridge Sustainable Living, we offer a series of workshops and events and tours of different spaces that are growing. So not just that we teach the skills, but we're taking them and pointing them to people in the community who are still doing that or are doing different ways to do that. Also, we collaborate with other organizations, like the Interfaith Food Bank has a learning garden. And so me personally, I will collaborate with them to do a series of workshops. And in what you'll see oftentimes in the spring is what's called the Seed to Supper program. And that's a basic gardening workshop. So we cover things like composting, water harvesting, building soil, companion planting, all the things that you need to know to have sustainable gardens.
What about those community gardens? I'm thinking specifically for people in condominiums or maybe apartments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of folks come to us and say, I'm in an apartment, how am I going to grow? Indoor growing is difficult at best, but sometimes they have a patio, and so you can look at container gardening in those spaces. But we also have community and communal gardens here in Lethbridge. So the Kinsman Park, for example, has a communal garden that's just open for anyone in the neighborhood to come in and participate in. In places like Copperwood, they're actually designing these community gardens to be actually in those spaces. So you can get a plot for community gardens as well if you don't have land of your own.
What about food storage? For many people, that can be a serious challenge.
Yeah, it is. That's another one of those skills, right, that used to be passed down from generation to generation. And so part of our mandate is really bringing back those basic skills and start teaching people how to start preserving, whether it's canning or jamming or pickling or dehydrating, making applesauce, things like that. And so making those workshops accessible financially as well as locationally. And then that collaborative approach comes in again in terms of partnering with places like the Soup Kitchen or the Interfaith Food Bank to utilize their spaces and teach their clientele as well how to do it.
The first time I tried some of the dried out fruit, such as like bananas,
Yeah.
it was almost like banana jerky.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of cool, you know, it was kind of tasty, and I tried that as a kid. I thought, this is really neat. Huh?
Yeah.
And it's healthy too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better than the alternative with a lot of candies for kids, right?
Absolutely, yeah, especially if we're comparing it to processed sugars and things like that.
Mandy, you have something as well called the Fruit Rescue Program.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Yeah, the Fruit Rescue Program is an initiative of the LSLA, and is a group of volunteers. And so I need to be really clear, we're not a fruit picking service, because you can't just phone us up and we'll come pick your fruit.
Apples, right? Sure.
We're limited by our volunteer base, but what we do is we have a relationship with landowners who have fruit trees and shrubs that they're not able to get to picking. Lots of our seniors can't get out and get their trees picked.
Of course, yeah.
And then we have a group of volunteers, and so what we do is we match our volunteers with our landowners, and we create these picking events where we're able to utilize the fruit. Thousands and thousands of pounds of fruit every year we divert from falling on the ground, and distribute it within the community, both to our seniors, the landowners, our volunteer pickers, the food bank, the soup kitchen, lots of different places. Recently, in the last couple of years, the Fruit Rescue Program was able to raise money for a commercial apple press, and so that's allowed us to be really mobile and actually go out to the spaces, pick the apples, for example, on site, and then do the juicing and the pasteurization there, and then distribute it in the form of juice as well.
How about when it comes to vegetables and helping people pick their vegetables? Do you have some veggie tales for us?
No veggie tales. We are limited again by the amount of volunteers that we have. So what we do offer is the ability to share some knowledge and pass that information around. So part of the community creation is that we have this beautiful foundation for being able to put people in touch with one another so that they can help people out. So for example, if our seniors need certain fruit and they can't get out to pick it, we'll pick a bag and take it to them. And so we try to connect our volunteers in that way, whether it's veggies or fruit. It just happens that we have a real abundance of fruit here in Lethbridge. Sour cherries, pears, apples of all kinds, raspberries, all the berries. So lots of abundance.
Now, you encourage people as well to buy local, but doesn't it get to be a little expensive though when you're going to the farmer's market? I mean, you're supporting local producers, which is wonderful, but sometimes people can't afford that.
Yeah, the cost is it's a really veiled process too in terms of the cost. We have lots of different issues within that shopping local idea. From the perspective of sustainability and regeneration, we always want to support local because we want to keep those people employed. We want our food to have the least impact miles-wise, kilometers-wise, fossil fuel-wise that it possibly can. And so cost becomes one of those things that we vote with our money
And
on.
maybe less pesticides as well?
Absolutely,
on all
way
those fruits
less,
and vegetables,
absolutely.
right? Which is healthier for you?
Absolutely. So there's always this like organic or non-organic conversation, and I think it's less about that and more about what are the ethics of how the farmer's grown it, how close is it to me, do I have a relationship with these people? That's a really important thing to consider. And so the other thing that you can do to keep the cost down is buy in bulk. So one of the things we offer as an organization is a cooperative ordering group where we can order large volumes and divide it up and you get it at a discount. All farmers have an ugly crop of carrots or potatoes that they can't sell in the store, and so you can approach the farmers if you have a relationship with them and say, hey, I'm happy to take your ugly beets or potatoes or carrots at a discounted rate, and that's often what happens. So there's ways around that cost.
That's a great idea. I mean, they're still healthy for you.
Yeah,
You're still getting
absolutely.
the same nutrients, right?
Yes,
Vitamins
absolutely.
and minerals.
And better nutrients because they haven't been transported so long as what they would be if they came from California and things like that.
Let's talk about free-range meat and eggs. My father used to love, when I was a kid, buying the how-to-right chickens, he used to call them, right?
Yes, yeah.
And because they were so big and plump and they were healthy, they weren't plumped up artificially, right? How
yeah.
important is that too?
Oh, it's really important. I think the important piece for my belief and what the LSLA tries to share is that you're asking questions. Who's your farmer? Where are they? Do you know them? Do you know what their practices are? And so it's less about spray or don't spray or plump them full of things or not, and more about just knowing that piece of it. Again, is short amount of distances our meat and our eggs come, the better off it is, the more nutrient dense it is, the better quality it is. And so you'll find that there's lots of farmers, local farmers, especially around Lethbridge, who may not be organic, but they're using ethical processes and they're not putting anything excess into the animals that needs to be. You can actually go out and witness the way they're farming. And so that's really great. Once you've had a taste for clean meat, I'll call it, free range is sort of, there's so many terms, and it depends who's selling the product in terms of like what it actually is. But ask those questions about how they treat the animals, take a tour. But once you've had a taste for it, so we used to have our own eggs when we lived out of the city, and everybody we gave our eggs to, they're ruined for store-bought eggs anymore because there's such a difference in quality and taste and texture. Yeah, and so it becomes in high demand, and that becomes a quality of life thing that you choose for you and your family. And the cost, you find ways around that. So.
What about when it comes to clothing? Do a lot of people still like to make their own clothes?
Oh, wow.
Outside of grandma making the mittens and toques for the
My grandma made so many of our clothes. And at the time, I did not appreciate it. And now I definitely do. I don't know a ton of people who make their own clothes. I do know a couple of people who make them fashionably. But another option that we have are the things like our community clothing swap, where we gather donations of clothing and then we redistribute it. There's hundreds of thousands of pounds of clothes go into landfills every week of the year on the planet. And so if we can distribute that locally and get it moving within the economy here in town, then you don't have to buy that many extra clothes. There's no reason for that to be. So we provide that opportunity through our clothing swap.
Mandy, some people just don't like buying used clothing.
There's certain
They're
things
like, ew! You know how many sleeves and
Absolutely.
pits have been on this shirt? Like, no.
Absolutely.
So how do you convince people that, why buy new when used will do?
Yeah, I don't believe in convincing people for anything. You either hear that call or you don't. And that's kind of how we function as an organization. We just want people to know we're here if that does feel right to you. There's certain items of clothing I won't buy used. I will only buy new, or I'll make on
undergarments,
my
for instance, right?
Absolutely. And what we ask for from our community when they're donating is gently used. So if it has holes and you're not wearing it, we don't expect somebody else to wear your nasty socks. Like, that doesn't need to happen.
That ain't right.
No, it's not at all. But you can find some really great, name brand if that's what you're into. We have
like
lots
my kids,
of things.
Oshkosh, that was a big thing way back when.
Absolutely. And my kids now as teenagers, they have like Champion and Adidas and all the things like that. We have those things donated. And when it's happening on a regular basis, you know that you can purge your closet, get a new group of clothes that, fills that gap if you want to feel like you've had some new clothes without a big cost associated with it.
Now, sometimes you also host make your own cleaners events.
Yes.
What are they all about?
Yeah, so that's another collaboration with the Purple Carrot here in town, and that's something that I do. So the LSLA will sometimes host that, and other people that we work with will. So the do-it-yourself cleaners is just really an introduction to how else we can make our own cleaners. So rather than bringing a bunch more chemical and plastic ware into the world, we're going to teach people how to make their own basic cleaners as well. And they work really, really well. There's this notion that the only way we can clean is by using bleach, for example. And there's tons and tons of studies
for mold, I know bleach really
Absolutely,
helps,
and it works
right?
really well, and there's a time and a place for it.
Right.
But just our general cleaners, if we're just cleaning the bathroom or we're doing windows, vinegar and water works pristine to clean a window, for example. And so
does it matter what kind of vinegar, like white vinegar?
I would use a white vinegar,
Okay.
yeah. So sometimes the apple cider vinegar, for example, is a little thicker.
Right.
But we want to empower people and inspire them to start looking around their kitchen to see how else they can use some of the supplies they have. So everything that we do and everything that we teach, no matter what the workshop is, will always be accessible. You don't have to buy a bunch of fancy things in order for it to help, in order for you to be able to use it. And the DIY household cleaners things about education, and then making their own, taking them home and trying them, and then they get to play with that formula and see how it works better for them.
I remember many years ago I was talking to an environmentalist saying to me, if you ever want to wash your vehicle, park it on your lawn. That way the water is going to go right into the grass and you can feed your grass at the same time,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Instead of out on your driveway or the sidewalk on the street, right? But what kind of natural soaps or detergents would you recommend as opposed to the store-bought brands?
Yeah, so there's a product called Castile soap. It's a basic hemp soap. In some of our stores, what we have a really...
You use that for vehicles?
No, not for vehicles specifically,
your
just
hands.
regular
Okay.
formulation for regular soap. Yeah, so Castile soap I would use for making like a liquid hand soap in a foamer pumper
How about
with
for
some
vehicles,
essential
commercial?
oils.
Is there anything?
I would use the same thing for the vehicle.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
absolutely. You have to be aware of formulation because some of the products, all the products, will leave a film if you have too much of it. So it's a bit of experimentation in terms of how it works for you, right? Most of the people I speak with aren't so much concerned about their vehicle. It's more about how am I going to clean my kids and my clothes and my kitchen counter and my bathroom. So part of what we want to inspire in people is this really creative process. So here's some information. Build on it, play with it, formulate it the way you want to, the way it works for your life and your journey, because not everybody's going to start by making their own cleaners. Maybe they start in a different way on their sustainable journey. And so we want to always leave it open so that they can actually make those choices for themselves.
I've tried some of those handmade soaps, you know, with the oatmeal and the honey, and oh, it's just amazing. The smell and the texture and the feel, and it's so worth it. And it lasts a lot longer than the commercial soaps, right?
Yeah, it does.
With all the chemicals.
Yeah.
Now, what about zero waste? You guys actually have a zero waste social gathering. What's that all about?
Yes, we do. So it was sort of inspired by Southern Alberta Zero Waste, which is the group on Facebook, and we've kind of taken it under our wing. So what we've realized is nobody needs any more meetings in life. Nobody needs any more sort of like strict, rigid spaces. So we just want to create a social event. And what we're doing is leaving it up to the people who are attending those to really decide what we're doing. So for example, last month we gathered in a space, we had some tea, some snacks, and we made reusable tissues and reusable paper towels. We just cut up some extra fabric and we all came in and made ourselves a set, and then off we went. So we're going to do a bit of a skill share. Every month it'll be something different. It might be like a documentary, it might be just somebody sharing a skill with the group, might make some reusable products, it just depends.
Andy Sandbach, president of the Lethbridge Sustainable Living Association, thanks so much for joining me today in studio.
Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.